Hey everyone, welcome to the Latent Space podcast. This is Alessio, partner and CTO in Residence and Decibel Partners. And today we're in the Singapore studio with Swyx.
Hey, this is our long-awaited one-on-one episode. I don't know how long ago the previous one was. Do you remember? 3-4 months?
No, yeah, it's been a while.
A minute. People really enjoyed it. It's just really, I think our travel schedules have been really difficult to get this stuff together. And then we also had like a decent backlog of guests for a while. I think we've kind of depleted that backlog now and we need to build it up again. But it's been busy and there's been a lot of news. So we actually get to do this like sort of rapid fire thing. I think some people, the podcast has grown a lot in the last 6 months. Maybe just reintroducing like what you're up to, what I'm up to, and why we're here in Singapore and stuff like that.
Yeah, my first time here in Singapore, which has been really nice. This country is really amazing, I would say. First of all, everything feels like the busiest part of the city. Everything is skyscrapers. There's like plants in all the buildings, or at least in the areas that I've been in, which has been awesome. And I was at one of the offices kind of on the south side, and from the 30th floor, you can see Indonesia on one side and you can see Malaysia on the other side. So it's quite small. One of the people there said their kid goes to school at the border with Malaysia, basically, so they could drive to Malaysia every day just to go pick her up from school. Yeah, and we came here, we hosted with you the Sovereign AI Summit Wednesday night. We had a lot of
Nvidia, Goldman, Temasek,
GSE, Singtel. And we're going to talk about this trend of Sovereign AI, which maybe we might cover on another episode. But basically, how do you drive, if you're a country, how do you drive productivity growth in a time where populations are shrinking, the workforce is shrinking, and AI can kind of supplement a lot of this. And then the question is, okay, should I put all this money in foundation models? Should I put it in data centers and infrastructure? Should I put it in GPUs? Should I put it in agents and whatnot? So we'll touch on some of these trends in the episode, but it was a fun event. And I did not expect some of the most senior people at the largest financial institution in Singapore ask about state-space models and some of the alternatives. So it's great to see how advanced the conversation is sometimes.
Yeah, I think that is mostly people trying to listen to jargon that is being floated around as like, oh, what could kill transformers? And then they jump straight there without actually exploring the fundamentals, the basics of what they'll actually put to work. That's fine. It's a forum to ask questions. So you want to ask about the future. But I feel like it's not very practical to spend so much time on those things. Part of the things that I do in space, especially when I travel, is to try to ask questions about what countries that are not the US and not San Francisco can do, because everyone feels a bit left out. You feel it here as well. And I'm trying to promote alternatives. I think AI engineering is one way that countries can capitalize on the industry without building a $100 billion cluster, which is 1/5 the GDP of Singapore. And so my pitch at the summit was that Singapore would be the AI Engineer Nation. We're also working on bringing the AI Engineer Conference to Singapore next year, together with iClear. So yeah, we're just trying my best, and I'm being looped into various government meetings to try to make that happen.
We'll definitely be here next year. I'll be back here very often. It's really nice. So.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, well, we have a lot of news. How do you think we should cover?
Maybe just recap, since the framework of the forwards of AI is something that came up end of last year.
Yeah.
So basically, we'll link in the show notes, but the end of year recap for 2023 was basically the forwards of AI, which we picked GPU rich versus GPU poor, the data quality wars, the multimodality wars, and the RAG/ops wars. So usually everything falls back under those 4 categories. So I'm pretty happy that 7 months later, it's something that still matters.
It still kind of holds up.
Yeah, most AI stuff from 8 months ago, it's really not that relevant anymore. And today we'll try and bucket some of the recent news on it. We haven't done a monthly thing in like 3 months. So 3 months is a lot of stuff.
That's mostly because I got busy with the conference.
Yeah.
But I do want to get back on that horse, or maybe just do it weekly so that I don't have such a big lift that I don't do it. I think the activation energy is the problem, really. I think frontier model wise, it seems like Claude has really carved out a persistent space for itself. For a long time, Anthropic was kind of like a clear number 2 to OpenAI. And with 3.5 Sonnet, at least in like some of the hard benchmarks on LMSys or coding benchmarks on LMSys, it is the undisputed #1 model in the world, even with 4.0 Mini. And we can talk about 4.0 Mini and benchmarking later on. But for Claude to be there and hold that position for what is more than a month now in AI time is a big deal. There's not much that people know publicly about what Anthropic did for Claude Sonnet, but I think it's still a huge achievement. It marks the beginning of a non-OpenAI centric world, to the point where people on Twitter have canceled ChatGPT. That's been a trend that's been going on for a while. We talked about the unbundling of ChatGPT, but now like new open source projects and tooling, they're just built for Claude. Like they don't even use OpenAI. That's a strategic threat to OpenAI, I think, a little bit. Obviously, OpenAI is so big that it doesn't really care about that. But for Anthropic, it's a big win. I think like to see that going and to see Anthropic differentiating itself and actually implementing research. So the rumor is that the scaling monosemanticity paper that they put out 2 months ago was a big part of Claude 3.5 Sonnet. I've had off-the-record chats with people about that idea, and they don't agree that it is the only cause. So I was thinking like this is the only thing that they did, but people say that there's about 4 or 5 other tricks that they haven't disclosed yet that went into 3.5 Sonnet. But the scaling monosemanticity paper is a very, very good read. It's a very long read, but it basically says that you can find control vectors, control features now that you can turn on to make it better at code without really retraining it. You just train a whole bunch of sparse autoencoders, find a bunch of features, and just say, like, let's up those features, and suddenly you're better at code, or suddenly you care a lot about the Golden Gate Bridge. These are the same things to the model. That is a huge, huge win for interpretability, because up to now, we were only doing interpretability on toy models, like a few million parameters, a model of Go or chess or whatever. Claude 3 Sonnet was interpreted and usefully improved using this technique. Wow.
Yeah, I think it would be amazing if we could replicate the same on the open models because now we can use Llama 3.1 to generate synthetic data for training and fine tuning. I think obviously Anthropic has a lot of compute and a lot of money. So once they figure out, okay, this is what we should make the model better at, they can kind of like put a lot of resources. I think in open source is probably going to be a more distributed effort, Like I feel like News has held the crown of like the best fine tuning data set owners for a while, but at some point that should change, hopefully, like other groups should step up. And I think if we can apply the same principles to like a model as big as 405B and bring them into like maybe the 7B form factor, that would be great. But yeah, Claude is great. I canceled ChatGPT a while ago. Really small podcaster run for latent space. It runs both on Claude and on OpenAI, and Claude is definitely better most of the time. It's not a benchmark, it's just vibes. But when the vibes are good, the vibes are good.
We run most of AI news summaries on Claude as well. And I always run it against OpenAI. Sometimes OpenAI wins. I do a daily comparison. But yeah, Claude's very strong at summarization and instruction following, which is something I care a lot about. So when you talk about frontier models, MMLU no longer cut it, right? Like we have reached like 92 on MMLU. It's going to like 95, 97. It just means you're memorizing MMLU. Like there's some fundamental irreducible level of mistakes because of MMLU's quality. We talked about this with Clementine on the Hugging Face episode. And so we need to see what else. What is the next frontier? I think there are 10 directions that I outlined below, but we'll talk about that later. Yeah, should we move on to Llama 3?
Yeah, 3.1. I guess that too. Make sure to differentiate between the models.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have a whole episode with Thomas Shalom from the Meta team, which was really, really good. And I'm glad we got the podcast to come out at the same time as the model.
Yeah, I think we're the only ones to coordinate for the paper release for the big launch, the 405 launch. Zuck did a few interviews, but we're the only ones that did the technical team interview.
Yeah. I mean, they were like surfing or something with the Bloomberg person. We should get invited to surf with Zuck. But I would be down to the audience, the technical breakdown.
So behind the scenes, one for listeners, one thing that we have attention about is who do we invite? Because obviously, if we get Mark Zuckerberg, it'll be a big name, then it will cause people to download us more, but it will be a less technical interview because he's not on the research team. He's CEO of Meta. And so I think it's this constant back and forth. Like we want to grow as a podcast, but we want to serve a technical audience, and we're trying to do that and thread that line because our currency as podcasters is the people that listen to it. And we need big names, but we also need to serve our audience well. And I think if we don't do it well, this actually goes all the way back to George Hotz. When after he finished recording with us, he said, you have two paths in the podcast world. Either you go be Lex Friedman, or you stay small and niche. And we definitely we like our niche. We think it's a good niche. It's going to grow, but at the same time, I still want us to grow. I want us to grow on YouTube, right? And so that's always like a meta thing. Not to get too meta.
Not that meta. The other meta.
Yeah. So Llama 3. Yeah.
I think to me the biggest thing is the training on outputs. Like every company is just hiding the fact that they've been fine tuning and training on GPT-4 outputs, and you cannot technically do it, but obviously OpenAI is not enforcing it. I think now, for the first time, there's like a clear path to how do we make a 7B model good without having to go through GPT-4 or going to Claude 3. And we'll kind of talk about this later, but I think we're seeing maybe the, not the death, but like selling the picks and shovels, it's kind of going away. And like building the vertical things is like where most of the value is actually getting captured, at least at the early stages. So being able to make small models better at specific things through a large model is more important than yet another 7B model that I can try and use. But at the end of the day, I still need to go through the large labs to fine tune. So that to me is the most interesting thing. It's such a large model that like, it's obviously amazing, but I don't know if a lot of people are switching from GPT-4 or Claude 3.5 to run 405B. I also don't know what the hosting options are as far as like scaling. I don't know if the Fireworks and Togethers of the world, how much capacity they actually have to serve this model, because at the end of the day, it's a lot of compute if some of the big products will switch to it, and you cannot easily run it yourself. So I don't know, but to me, the synthetic data piece is definitely the most interesting.
Yeah, I would say that it is not enough now to say that synthetic data is real. I actually shipped that in the original email, and then I changed that in the sort of what you see now in the podcast description. But because it is so established now that synthetic data is real, therefore you need to go to the next level, which is, okay, what do you use it for and how do you use it? And I think that is what was interesting for Llama 3 for me. You should read the paper, 90 pages of all filler, no killer is something like that. This is what the people were saying. Very, very, like, for once, a frontier model with a proper paper instead of a marketing blog post. And, they actually spelled out how they'd use synthetic data for a few different domains. So they have synthetic data for code, for math, for multilinguality, for long context, for tool use, and then also for ASR and voice generation. And I think that, yeah, okay, now you have the license to go distill Llama 3, 4, or 5B, but how do you do that? That is the sort of the next frontier. Now you have the permission to do it. How do you do it? And I think that people are, going to reference Llama 3 a lot, but then they can use those techniques for everything else. In our episode with Thomas, he talked about, I was very focused on synthetic data for pre-training because that's my context. That's my conversations with Technium from News and all the other people doing synthetic data for pre-training and fine-tuning. But he was talking about post-training as well. And for everything here was post-training. In fact, I wish we had spent more time with Thomas on this stuff. We just didn't have the paper beforehand. But I think when I call Llama 3 the synthetic data model, is you have the license for it, but then you also have the roadmap, the recipe, because it's in the paper. And now everybody knows how to do this. And probably, obviously, OpenAI is probably laughing at us because they did this a year ago. But now it's in the open.
Yeah, I mean, they can laugh all they want, but they're coming for them. I think that's definitely the biggest vibe shift, right? It's like, obviously, Llama 3.1 is good. Obviously, Claude is good. Maybe a year and a half ago, you didn't get the benefit of the doubt as like an OpenAI competitor to be state of the art. It was kind of like, oh, Anthropic, yeah, those guys are cute over there. They're trying to do their thing, but it's not OpenAI. And like Llama 2 is great, but like it's really not a serious model. It's like just good enough. I think now it's like every time Anthropic releases something, people are like, okay, this is like a serious thing. Whenever like Meta releases something, it's like, okay, they're at the same level. And I don't know if OpenAI is kind of like sandbagging the GPT next, Yeah, I don't. And then they kind of, yesterday or today, they announced the Search GPT thing behind the wait list.
This is the Singapore confusion. When was it?
When was it?
Because it happened yesterday US time, but today Singapore time.
So Thursday. It's been really confusing. But yeah, and people are kind of like, oh, okay, OpenAI, I don't know if we can take you seriously.
Well, one of the AI grants employees, I think Hirsch, tweeted that, you can skip the waitlist, just go to perplexity.com. And that was a really, really sick burn for the OpenAI Search GPT waitlist. But their implementation will have something different. They probably like train a dedicated model for that. They'll have some innovation that we haven't seen.
Data licensing, obviously.
Data licensing, yes. We're optimistic, but the vibe shift is real, and I think that's something that is just worth commenting on and watching, and how the other labs catch up. I think what you said there is actually very interesting. The trend of successive releases is very important to watch. If things get less and less exciting, then it's a red flag for that company, and if things get more and more exciting, it means that these guys have a good team, they have a good plan, good ideas. I will call out the Microsoft Phi team as well. Phi 1 was kind of widely regarded to be overtrained on benchmarks, and Phi 2 and Phi 3 subsequently improved a lot as well. I would say also similar for Gemma 1 and 2. Gemma 2 is currently leading in terms of the local Llama sort of vibe check eval informal straw poll. And that's only like a month after release. They released at the AI Engineer World's Fair, and I didn't know what to think about it because Gemma 1 wasn't like super well received. It was just kind of like, here's like free tier Gemini, but now Gemma 2 is actually like a very legitimately widely used model by the open source and local Llama community. So that's great until Llama 3 7B came along. Yeah. And so like and we'll talk about this also, like just the wins of AI winter is also like, what is the depreciation schedule on this model inference and training costs? Like it's very high.
Yeah. I'm curious to get your thought on Mistral, everybody's favorite sparkling weights company.
Yeah.
They just released the Mistral large enough.
Mistral large 2.
Yeah, large 2.
So this was one day after Llama 3, presumably because they were speaking at ICML, which is going on right now. By the way, Brittany is doing a guest host thing for us. She's running around the poster sessions doing what I do, which is very great because I couldn't go because of my visa issue. I have to be careful what I say here, but I think because we still want to respect their work. But Mistral Large, I would say, is like not as exciting as Llama 3. I think that is very, very fair to say. It is, yes, another GPT-4 class model released as open weights, with a research license, not a commercial license, but still open weights. And that's good for the community. But it is a step down in terms of the general excitement around Mistral compared to Llama. I think that would be fair to say, and I would say that to Mistral themselves. So the general hope is, and I cannot say too much, because I've had offline conversations with people close to this. The general hope is that they need something more. Of the 10 elements of like what is next in terms of like frontier model boundaries, Mistral needs to make progress there. They made progress here with like instruction following and structured output and multilinguality and all those things. But I think to stand out, you need to basically pull a stunt. You need to be a superlatively good company in one dimension. And now, unfortunately, Mistral does not have that crown as open source kings. Like a year ago, I was saying Mistral are the kings of open source AI. Now they've lost that crown. By the way, they've also deprecated Mistral 7B, 8x7B, and 8x22B, right? So now there's only like the closed source models that are the API platform. So has Mistral basically started becoming more of a closed model proprietary platform? I don't believe that's true. I believe that they're still very committed to open source, but they need to come up with something more that people can use, and that's a grind. I mean, they have $600 million to do it,
right?
So that's still good, but people are waiting for like what's next from them.
Yeah, to me the perception was interesting in the comments of the release. Everybody was like, why do you have a non-commercial license? You're not making any money anyway from the inference. So I feel like the AI engineering tier list, is kind of shifting in real time. And maybe Mistral, like you said before, was like, hey, thank God for these guys. They're saving us in open source. They're kind of like speed running GPT-1, GPT-2, GPT-3 in open source. But now it's like they're kind of moving away from that. I haven't really heard of that many people using them at scale commercially, just from, discussions. So I'm curious to see what the next step is.
But also you're sort of US based and maybe they're not focused there, right? So
no, exactly.
It's a very big elephant and we're only touching pieces of it as blind, blind leading the blind. I will call out, they have interesting experimentations with Mamba, and Mistral Nemo is actually on the efficiency frontier chart that I drew that is still relevant. So don't discount Mistral Nemo. But Mistral Large, otherwise, like it's an update. It's a necessary update for Mistral Large V1. But other than that, they're just kind of holding the line, not really advancing the field yet. That'll be my statement there. So those are the frontier big labs.
Yes.
And then now we're going to shift a little bit towards the smaller deployable on-device solutions.
Yeah. First of all, shout out to our friend 3DAO, who released FlashAttention 3. FlashAttention 2, we kind of did a deep dive on the podcast. He came on in the studio back then. It's just great to see how small groups can make a big impact on a whole industry, just like by making math better. So it's just great to see. Just wanted to give 3 a shout out. Something
I mentioned there, and something that always comes up, even in the Sovereign AI Summit that we did, was what does Nvidia's competitors have any threat to Nvidia? AMD, like MADX, like Etched, which caused a lot of noise with their Sohu chip as well. And just the simple fact is that NVIDIA has won the hardware lottery and people are customizing for NVIDIA. Like FlashAttention 3 only works for NVIDIA, only works for H100s. And like this much work, this much scaling, this much validation going into this stuff is very difficult to replicate or very expensive to replicate for the other hardware ecosystems. So not impossible. I actually heard a really good argument from one of, I think it is Martin Casado from A16Z, who was saying basically like, yeah, like absolutely NVIDIA's hardware and ecosystem makes sense. And obviously that's contributed to it's like, I don't know, like it's like the most valuable company in the world right now. But current training runs are like 100 million to 200 million in cost. But when they go to 500 million, when they go to a billion, when they go to 1 trillion, then you can actually start justifying making custom ASICs for your run. And if they cut your costs by like half, then you make your money back in one run.
Yeah. Martin has always been a fan of custom ASIC. I think they wrote a really good post maybe a couple of years ago about cloud repatriation.
Oh yeah,
and
I think he got a lot of shit for that, but it's becoming more consensus now, I think. So Noam Shazeer, blogging again, fantastic, gifts to the world. This guy non-stop bangers. And so he's at Character.AI and he put up a post talking about 5 tricks that they use to serve 20% of Google search traffic as LLM inference. A lot of people were very shocked by that number, but I think you just have to remember that most conversations are multi-turn, right? Like in the span of one Google search, I will send like 10 text messages, right? So obviously there's like a ratio here that matters. It's obviously a flex of Character.AI's traction among the kids, because I have tried to use Character.AI since then, and I still cannot for the life of me get it. Have you tried?
I tried it, but yeah, it's definitely not.
Yeah, they
not
launched like voice. I tried to talk to it. It was just so stupid. I didn't like it myself, but this is what it means.
Please still come on the podcast, Noam Shazeer.
Yeah,
sorry,
please,
we didn't mean.
No. It's because I don't really understand like what the use case is for, apart from like the therapy, role play, homework assistant type of stuff that is the norm. But anyway, one of the most interesting things, say detailed 5 tricks. One thing that people talk a lot about is native int 8 training. I got it wrong in our Thomas podcast. I said FP8 is int 8. And I think like that is something that is an easy win. Like we should basically, when we're getting to the point where we're overtraining models 100 times past chinchilla ratio to optimize for inference, the next thing is actually like, hey, let's stop using so much memory when training, because we're going to quantize it anyway for inference. So like just let's pre-quantize it in training. So that makes a lot of sense. The other thing as well is this concept of global local hybrid architecture, which I think is basically going to be the norm, right? So he has this formula of 1-to-5 ratio of global attention to local attention, and he says that works for the long form conversations that Character has. Okay, that's great. And like simultaneously, we have independence research from other companies about similar hybrid ratios being the best for their research. So Nvidia came out with a Mamba transformer hybrid research thing, and in their estimation, you only need 7% transformers. Everything else can be state space models. Jamba also had something like between like 6 to like 30 to 1, and basically every form of hybrid architecture seems to be working at the research stage. So I think like if we scale this, it makes complete sense that you just need a mix of architectures, and it could well be that the transformer block, instead of transformers being all you need, transformers are the global attention thing, And then the local attention thing can be the state space models, can be the RWKVs, can be another transformer, but just limited by a sliding window. And I think like we're slowly discovering like the fundamental building blocks of AI. One is transformers, one is something that's local, whatever that is. And then, who knows what else is next. Maybe the other stuff is adapters, but we can talk about that. But yeah, headline is that Noam, maybe he's too confident, but I believe him. Noam thinks that he can do inference at 13x cheaper than the fireworks together, right? So like there is a lot of room left to improve inference.
I mean, it does make sense, right? Because like otherwise
Character would be bankrupt.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, they would be losing a ton of money. So
they are rumored to be exploring a sale. So I'm sure money is still an issue for them, but I'm also sure they're making a lot of money. So it's very hard to tell because it's not a very public company.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of the things in the market right now too. Is like, hey, do you just want to keep building? Do you want to like just not worry about the money and go build somewhere else? Kind of like a maybe Inflection and Adapt and some of these other non-acqui-hires licensing deals and whatnot. So I'm curious to see what companies decide to stick with it.
Like I think Google or Meta should pay $1 billion for Noam alone.
Right.
The purchase price for Character is $1 billion, which is super
which is nothing at their market caps, right?
It's nothing.
Like Meta's market cap right now is
like 2 trillion.
1.15 trillion.
Yeah,
because they're down 5%, 11% in the past month.
What?
Yeah. So if you pay $1 billion, that's like 0.01% of your market cap, and they pay $1 billion for WhatsApp, and they buy 1% of their market cap on that at the time. So
yeah, that is beyond our pay grade. But the last piece of the GPU rich poor wars. So we're going from the super GPU rich down to like the medium GPU rich, and now down to the GPU poors is on device models, right? Which is something that people are very, very excited about. So at my conference, Mozilla AI, I think was kind of like the talk of the town there on Llamafile. We had Justine Tunney come in and explain like some of the optimizations that they did, and their just general vision for on-device AI. I think that like it's basically the second act of Mozilla, like a lot of good with the open source browser. And obviously, then they have since declined because it's very hard to keep up in that field, and Mozilla has had some management issues as well. But now that the operating system is moving to the AI layer, now they're also like promoting open source AI there, and also like private AI, right? Like open source is synonymous with local, private, and all the good things that people want. And I think their vision of like even running this stuff on CPUs at a very, very fast speed by just like being extremely cracked, I think is very understated. And we should probably try to support it more. And it's just amazing to host these people and see the progress.
Yeah, I think to me the biggest question about on-device, obviously there's a Gemini Nano, which is getting shipped with Chrome.
Yeah, so let's survey it, right? So Llamafile is one executable that runs on every architecture.
Yep.
Similar for, by the way, Mojo from Modular, which also spoke at the conference. And then what else? Llama CPP, MLX, those kinds are also that layer. Then the next layer up would be the built-in into their products by the vendors. So Google Chrome is building Gemini Nano into the browser. The next version of Google Chrome will have Nano inside that you can use like window.ai something, and it would just call Nano. There'll be no download, no latency whatsoever because it runs on your device. And there's Apple Intelligence as well, which is Apple's version, which is in the OS accessible by apps. And then there's a long tail of others. But like, yeah, your comments on those things.
My biggest question is how much can you differentiate at that model size? Like how big is going to be the performance gap between all these models, and like, are people going to be aware of what model is running? Right now for the large models, we're still pretty aware of like, oh, is this Sonnet 3.5? Is this GPT-4? Is this, 3.1 405B? I think the smaller you get, the more it's just going to become like an utility, So like you're not going to need a model router for like small models. You're not going to need any of that. Like they're all going to converge to like the best possible performance.
Actually, Apple Intelligence is the model router, I think. They have something like 14, I did a count in my newsletter, like 14 to 20 adapters. And so based on your use case, they'll route and load the adapter, or they'll route to OpenAI. So there is some routing layer.
Yeah.
To me, I think a lot of people were trying to puzzle out the strategic moves between OpenAI and Apple here, because Apple is in a very good position to commoditize OpenAI. There were some rumors that Google was working with Apple to launch it. They did not make it for the launch, but presumably Apple wants to commoditize OpenAI, right? So, when you launch, you can choose your preferred external AI provider, and it's either OpenAI or Google or someone else. I mean, that puts Apple at the center of the world, with the ability to make routing decisions. And I think that's probably good for privacy, probably good for the planet, because you're you're not running like oversized models on like your spell check tasks. And I'm generally pretty positive on it. Like, I'm not concerned about the capabilities issue. It meets their benchmarks. Apple put out a whole bunch of proprietary benchmarks because they don't like to do anything in the way that everyone else does it. So like, in the Apple Intelligence blog post, they I think all of them were just like their internal human evaluations, and only one of them was an industry standard benchmark, which was IF-eval, which is good. But why didn't you also release your MMLU? Oh, because you suck on it. All right.
Well, I actually think all these models will be good. And on the Apple side, I'm curious to see what the price tag will be to be the default. Right now, Google pays them $20 billion to be the default search.
I see.
The
rumor is zero.
Yeah. I mean, today, even if it was $20 billion,
I see.
That's like nothing compared to Nvidia's worth $3 trillion. So paying $20 billion to be the default AI provider would be cheap compared to search, given that AI is actually being such a core part of the experience. Like Google being the default for Apple's phone experience really doesn't change anything.
Yeah.
Becoming the default AI provider for the Apple experience will be worth a lot more than this.
I mean, so I can justify it being zero instead of 20 billion is because OpenAI has to foot the inference costs, right? So that's a lot.
Well, yeah, Microsoft really is putting it. But again, Microsoft is worth $2 trillion,
So as someone who, this is the web developer coming out, as someone who is a champion of the open web, Apple has been, let's just say, a roadblock in that direction. I think Gemini Nano being good is more important than Apple Intelligence being generally capable. Apple Intelligence being on-device router for Apple apps is good, but if you care about the open web, you really need Gemini Nano to work. And we're not sure. Right now, we have some demos showing that it's fast enough, but we haven't had systematic tests on it. Along the lines of that research, I will highlight that Apple has also put out DataComp LM. I actually interviewed DataComp at NeurIPS last year, and they've branched out from just vision and images to language models. And Apple has put out a reference implementation of the 7B language model that's built on top of DataComp, and it is better than FindWeb, which is huge because FindWeb was the state of the art last month. And that's fantastic. So basically, DataComp is an open data, open weights, open model, super everything open. So there will be a lot of people optimizing this kind of model. They'll be building on architectures like mobile LLM and small LLM, which basically innovate in terms of shared weights and shared matrices for smaller models, so that you just optimize the amount of file size and memory that you take up. And I think just general trend of on-device models, the only way that intelligence too cheap to meter happens is everything happens on device. So unfortunately, that means that OpenAI is not involved in this. OpenAI's mission is intelligence too cheap to meter, and they're not doing the one thing that needs to happen for that because there's no business plan in monetizing an API for that. By definition, none of this is APIs.
I don't know. I guess Johnny Ive and Sam Altman need to figure it out so they can do their own
I'm excited
device.
for the OpenAI phone. I don't know if you would buy an OpenAI phone. I mean, I'm very locked into the iOS ecosystem, but
I will not be the first person to buy it because I don't want to be stuck with the rabbit equivalent of an AI phone. But I think it makes a lot of sense. I wonder.
They're building a search engine now. The next thing is the phone.
Exactly. So we'll see.
We'll see when it comes to the waitlist. We'll see.
Yeah. We'll review it. All right. So that was GPU rich, GPU poor. Maybe we just want to run quickly through the quality data wars. There's mostly drama in this section. There's not as much much research.
I think there's a lot of news going in the background. So the New York Times lawsuit is still ongoing. Yeah. It's just we won't have specific things to update people on. There are specific deals that are happening all the time with Stack Overflow making deals with everybody, with Shutterstock making deals with everybody. It's hard to make a single news item out of something that is just slowly cooking in the background.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on the New York Times thing, OpenAI's strategy has been to make the New York Times prove that their content is actually original or like actually interesting. Really? Yeah. So it's kind of like, the iRobot meme. It's like, can a robot create a beautiful new symphony? And the robot is like, can you? I think that's what OpenAI's strategy is.
Yeah, I think that the danger with the lawsuit, because this lawsuit is very public, because OpenAI responded, including with Ilya, showing their emails with New York Times, saying that, hey, we were doing a deal, you were like very close to a deal, and then suddenly on the eve of the deal, you called it off. I don't think New York Times has responded to that one. But it's very, very strange because the New York Times' brand is like trying to be like, they're supposed to be the top newspaper in the country. If OpenAI and this was my criticism of it at the point in time, like, okay, we'll just go to the next best paper, the Washington Post, the Financial Times, they're all happy to work with us. And then what does New York Times have?
Yeah.
So you just lost out on like $100 million, $200 million a year of licensing deals just because you wanted to pick that war, which ideologically, I think they're absolutely right to do that. But, the other people, The Verge did a very good interview with, I think, the Washington Post. I'm going to get the outlet wrong. The Verge did a very good interview with a newspaper owner, editor, on why they did the deal with OpenAI. And I think that listening to them on like their thinking through like the reasoning of like the pros and cons of picking a fight versus partnering, I think is very interesting.
Yeah, I guess the winner in all of this is Reddit, which is making over 200 million just in data licensing to OpenAI and some of the other AI providers. 200 million is like more than most AI startups are making.
Yeah. So I think there was an IPO play because Reddit conveniently did this deal before IPO, right?
Totally.
Is it like a one-time deal and then, the stock languishes from there? I don't know.
Yeah. No, well, their IPO is done. Well, I guess it's not gone down. So in this market, they're up 25%, I think, since IPO. But I saw the FTC had opened an inquiry into it just to investigate. So I'm curious what the antitrust regulations are going to be like when it comes to data. Obviously, acquisitions are blocked to prevent kind of like stifling competition. I wonder if for data it will be similar where, hey, you cannot actually get all of your data only behind $100 million plus contracts because otherwise you're stopping any new company from building a competing product. So that's a serious overreach of the state there. Yeah.
So as a free market person, I want to defend. It is weird. I'm a free market person and I'm a content creator, right? So I want to be paid for my content. At the same time, I believe that people should be able to make their own decisions about all these deals. But UGC is a weird thing because UGC is contributed by volunteers.
Yeah.
And the other big news about Reddit is that apparently they have added to their robots.txt like only Google should index us, right? Because we did the deal with Google. And that's obviously blocking OpenAI from crawling them, Anthropic from crawling them, Perplexity from crawling them. Perplexity maybe ignores all robots.txt, but that's a whole different other issue. And then the other thing is I think this is big in the sort of normie worlds. The actors, Scarlett Johansson had a very, very public Apple Notes takedown of OpenAI. Only Scarlett Johansson can do that to Sam Altman. And then, I was very proud of my newsletter for that day. I called it Skyfall because the voice of that voice was Sky. So I called it Skyfall. But it's true. Like, there's that one she can win. And there's a very well-established case law there. And the YouTubers and the music industry, the RIAA, like the most litigious section of the creator economy, has gone after Udio and Suno, Mikey from our podcast with him. And it's unclear what will happen there, but it's going to be a very costly legal battle for sure.
Yeah. Music industry and lawsuits, name a more iconic duo, so I think this is to be expected.
I think last time we talked about this, I was pretty optimistic that something like this would reach the Supreme Court. And with the way that this Supreme Court is making rulings, like we just need a judgment on whether or not training on data is transformative use. So I think it is. Literally, we're using transformers to do transformative use. So then it's open season for AI to do it. And comparatively, the content creators and owners will lose out. They just will.
Yeah.
Because right now we're paying them money out of fear of lawsuits. If the Supreme Court rules that there are no lawsuits to be had, then all that money disappears.
I think people are price craving latent space and we're not getting a dime. So that's what it is.
Yeah. No, you can support with like an $8 a month subscription, and that pays for our microphones and travel and stuff like that. It's definitely not worth the amount of time we're putting into it, but it's a labor of love.
Yeah, exactly.
Synthetic data.
Yeah. I guess we talked about it a little bit before with Llama, but there was also the AlphaProof thing.
Yes. Just before I came here, I was working on that newsletter.
Yeah, Google trained, almost got gold medal. I forget what
Yes, they're 1 point short of the gold medal.
Yeah, 1 point short of the gold medal.
It's a remarkably... I wish they had more questions. So the International Math Olympiad has 6 questions, and each question has 7 points. Every single question that the AlphaProof model tried, it got full marks on. It just failed on 2. And then the cutoff was like sadly one point higher than that. But still, like it was a very big, like a lot of people have been looking at IMO as like the next gold prize, grand prize in terms of what AI can achieve. And betting markets and Eliezer Yudkowsky has updated and saying like, yeah, like we're pretty close. Like we basically have reached it near gold medal status. We definitely reached silver and bronze status, and we'll probably reach gold medal next year. Right, which is good. There's also related work from Hugging Face on the Numina math competition. So this is on the AI Mathematical Olympiad, which is an easier version of the human math Olympiad. This is all like related research work on search and verifier model-assisted exploration of mathematical problems. So yeah, that's super positive. I don't really know much else beyond that. Like it's always hard to cover this kind of news because it's not super practical, and it also doesn't generalize. So one thing that people are talking about is this concept of jagged intelligence, because at the same time we're having this discussion about being superhuman. You know, one of the IMO questions was solved in 19 seconds after we gave the question to AlphaProof. At the same time, language models cannot determine if 9.9 is smaller than or bigger than 9.11. And part of that is 9.11 is an inside job. But and it's a funny. And that's someone else's joke. I don't know. I really like that joke. But it's jagged intelligence. It is a failure to generalize because of tokenization or because of whatever. And what we need is general intelligence. We've always been able to train dedicated special models to win prizes and do stunts. But the grand prize is general intelligence. That same model does everything.
Is it gonna work that way? I don't know. I think like if you look back a year and a half ago and you would say, can one model get to general intelligence? Most people would be like, yeah, we can keep scaling. I think now it's like, is it going to be more of a mix of models? You know, like, can you actually do one model that does it all?
Yeah, absolutely. I think GPT-5 or Gemini 3 or whatever would be much more capable at this kind of stuff while it also serves our needs with everyday things. It might be completely uneconomical. Like, why would you use a giant ass model to do normal stuff? But it is just a demonstration of proof that we can build superintelligence for sure. and then, you know, everything else follows from there. But yeah, right now we're just pursuing superintelligence. I always think about this, you know, just reflecting on the GPU rich poor stuff and now this alpha geometry stuff. I used to say you pursue capability first, then you make it more efficient. You make frontier model, then you distill it down to the 70B, which is what Llama 3 did. And by the way, also OpenAI did it with GPT 4.0 and then distilled it down to 4.0 mini. And then Claude also did it with Opus and then with 3.5 Sonnet, right? That suitable recipe. In fact, I call it part of the deployment strategy of models. You train a base layer, you train a large one, and then you distill it down. You add structured output generation, tool calling and all that. You add the long context. You add like this standard stack of stuff in post-training that is growing and growing, to the point where now OpenAI has opened a team for mid-training that happens before post-training. I think like one thing that I've realized from this alpha geometry thing is before you have capability and you have efficiency, there's an in-between layer of generalization that you need to accomplish. You need to do capability in one domain, you need to generalize it, then you need to efficientize it. Then you have good models.
That makes sense. I think like maybe the question is how many things can you make it better for before generalizing it, you know? Yeah, I don't have a good intuition for that.
We'll talk about that in the next thing. Yeah, so we can skip Nemotron's worth looking at if you're interested in synthetic data. Multimodal labeling, I think, has happened a lot. Maybe we'll just jump to multimodal now.
Yeah, we got a bunch of news. Well, the first news is that 4.0 voice is still not out, even though the demo was great. I think they're starting to roll out the beta in the next week.
So I am subscribing. I subscribe back to ChatGPT Plus.
You give in?
I gave in because they're rolling it out next week. So you better be on the cutoff or you're not going to get it.
Nice bait, Sam Altman.
I said this. I said when I talk about unbundling on ChatGPT, it's basically because they had nothing to offer people. That's why people are unsubscribing, because like, why keep paying $20 a month for this, right? But now they have proprietary models. Oh yeah, I'm back in, right? Like
We're so back.
We're so back. I would pay $200 for the Scarlett Johansson voice, but they'll probably get sued for that. But yeah, the voice is coming. We had a demo at the World's Fair that was I think the second public demo. Roman, I have to really give him a shout out for that. We had a few people drop out last minute, and he rescued the conference and worked really hard. Like, I think off the scenes, I think something that people don't understand is OpenAI puts a lot of effort into their presentations, and if it's not ready, they won't launch it. Like he was ready to call it off if we didn't make the AV work for him. And I think they care about their presentation and how they launch things to people. Those minor polish details really matter. Just for the record, for people who don't understand what happened was, you can go see, just look for like the GPT 4.0 talk at the AI Engineer World's Fair. But second of all, because it was presented live at a conference with large speakers blaring next to you, and it is a real-time voice thing. So it's listening to its own voice, and it needs to distinguish between its own voice and between the human voice, and it needs to ignore its own voice. So we had OpenAI engineers tune that for our stage to make this thing happen, which is absurd.
Yeah.
It was so funny, but also like, shout out to them for doing that for us and for the community, right? Because I think people wanted an update on voice.
Yeah, they definitely do care about demos. Not much to add there.
Yeah.
Llama 3 voice?
Something that maybe is buried among all the Llama 3 news is that Llama 3 is supposed to be a multimodal model. It was delayed thanks to the European Union, apparently. I'm not sure what the whole story there is. I didn't really read that much about it. It is coming. Llama 3 will be multimodal. It uses adapters rather than being natively multimodal. But I think that it's interesting to see the state of meta AI research come together, because there was this independent threads of voice box and seamless communication. These are all projects that Meta AI has launched that basically didn't really go anywhere because they were all one-offs. But now all that research is being pulled into Llama. Like Llama is just subsuming all of FAIR, all of Meta AI into this thing. And yeah, you can see a voice box mentioned in Llama 3 voice adapter. I was kind of bearish on conformers because I looked at the state of existing conformer research in ICM, Clear, and NeurIPS, and they were far, far, far behind Whisper. Mostly because of scale, like the sheer amount of resources that they're dedicated to. But Meta is approaching there. I think they had 230,000 hours of speech recordings. I think Whisper is something like 600,000. So Meta just needs to 3x the budget on this thing, and they'll do it. And we'll have open source voice.
Yeah, and then we can hopefully fine tune on our voice, and then we just need to write this episode instead of actually recording it.
I should also shout out the other thing from Meta, which is a very, very big deal, which is Chameleon, which is a natively early fusion vision and language model. So most things are late fusion, basically. Like you freeze an existing language model, you freeze an existing vision transformer, and then you kind of fuse them with the thin adapter layer. That is what Llama 3 is also doing. But Chameleon is slightly different. Chameleon is interleaving in the same way that IDFix, the sort of data set is doing, interleaving natively for image generation and vision and text understanding. And I think like once that is better understood, that is going to be better. That is the more deep learning pilled version of this, the more GPU rich version of doing all this. I asked Yite this question about Chameleon in his episode. He did not confirm or deny, but I think he would agree that is the right way to do multimodality. And now that we're proving out that multimodality is valuable to people, basically all these half-ass measures around adapters is going to flip to natively multimodal. To me, that's what GPT 4.0 represents. It is the train from scratch, fully omnimodal model, which is early fusion. So if you want to read that, you should read the Chameleon paper, basically. That's what is my whole point.
And there was some of the Chameleon drama because the open model doesn't have image generation.
Yeah.
And then there were fine-tuning recipe.
It's
and then
so funny.
The leads were like, no, do not follow these instructions to fine-tune image generation.
It's really funny. I don't know what okay, so yeah, whenever image generation is concerned, obviously because of the Gemini issue, it's very tricky for large companies to release that. But They can remove it, say that they remove it, point out exactly where they remove it, and let the open source community put it back in. So the last piece I had, which I kind of deleted, was just a special mention, honorable mention of Gemma again with PaliGemma, which is one of the smaller releases from Google I/O. I think you went, right? So PaliGemma was mentioned in there. I don't know. It was one of the
one of the workshops.
Very small release. Yeah. But CoPaliGemma now is being talked a lot about as a late fusion model for extracting structured text out of PDFs. Very, very important for business workhorses.
Yes.
So apparently it is doing better than Amazon TextRact and all the others, state of the art. And it's a tiny model that does this. And it's really interesting. It's a combination of the Omar Khattab's Colbert sort of retrieval approach on top of a vision model, which I was severely underestimating PaliGemma when it came out, but like it continues to come up. Like there's a lot of trends. And again, this is making a lot of progress here, just in terms of their applications in real world use cases. Like these are small models, but they're very, very capable, and they're a very good basis to build things like PaliGemma.
Yeah, no, Google has been doing great. I think maybe a lot of people initially wrote them off, but between some of the Gemini Nano stuff, like Gemma 2, PaliGemma. We'll talk about some of the KV cache and context caching.
That's RAG Wars.
So there's a lot to like. And our friend Logan is over there now. So he's excited about everything they got going on. So yeah.
I think there's a little bit of a fight between AI Studio and Vertex. And what Logan represents is so he's moved from DevRel to PM. And he was PM for the Gemma 2 launch. Vertex has this reputation of being extremely hard to use. It's one reason why GCP has kind of fallen behind a little bit. And so AI Studio represents like the developer-friendly version of this, like the Netlify or Vercel to the AWS, right? And I think it's Google's chance to reinvent itself for this audience, for the AI engineer audience that doesn't want like 5 levels of auth IDs and org IDs and policy permissions just to get something going.
True. We want to jump into RAG Ops Wars.
What to say here? I think that what RAG Ops Wars are to me like the tooling around the ecosystem. And I might need to actually rename this war.
War renaming alert. What are we calling it?
LLM OS.
LLM OS.
Because it used to be when the only job for AIs to do was chatbots. Mm-hmm. Then RAG matters. Yep. Then Ops matters. But now we need AIs to also write code. We also need AIs to work with other agents, right? That's not reflected in any of the other wars. So I think that just the whole point is, what does an LLM plug into with the broader ecosystem to be more capable than an LLM can be on its own?
Yep.
I just announced it, but this is something I've been thinking about a lot. It's a blog post I've been working on. Basically, my tip to other people is if you want to see where things are going, you go open up the ChatGPT GPT creator. Every single button on the GPT creator is a potential startup. Mm-hmm. Exa is for search. The knowledge RAG thing is for RAG. The
we
code interpreter.
In E2B.
Yeah, congrats. Is that announced? I don't know if
it's announced now. By the time this goes out, it'll be.
Briefly, what is E2B?
So E2B is basically a code interpreter SDK as a service. So you can add code interpreter to any model. They partner with Mistral to add that in. They have this open source Claude artifacts clone using E2B. The amount of like traction that they've been getting in open source has been amazing. I think they went in like 4 months from like 10K to 1 million containers spun up on the cloud. So, you told me this maybe like 9 months ago, 12 months ago, something like that. You were like, what you literally just said, every ChatGPT plugin can be
a startup.
Can be a business startup.
Yeah.
And I think now it's more clear than ever. Then the chatbots are just kind of like the band-aid solution, you know, before we build more comprehensive systems. And Exa just raised a Series A from Lightspeed. So
I tried to get you in on that one as well.
No, I meant that.
I'm trying to be a scout, man. I don't know.
This is giving, as a VC, early stage VC, like giving capabilities to the models is like way more important than the actual LLM ops, the observability and like all these things. Like those are nice, but like the way you build real value for a lot of the customers is like, how can this model do more than just chat with me? So running code, doing analysis, doing web search.
I might disagree with you. I think they're all valuable. They're all valuable.
Yeah, well,
they're all valuable. So I will disagree with you just on like I find ops my number one problem right now building small talk, building AI news, building anything that I do, and I don't think I'm happy with all the ops solutions that I've explored. There are some 80-something ops startups.
Right.
I nearly started one of them, but we'll briefly talk about this ops thing. Then we'll go back to RAG. The central way I explain this thing to people is that all the model labs view their job as stopping by serving you their model over an API, right? That is unfortunately not everything that you need in order to productionize this API. So obviously there's all these startups. They're like, yeah, we are ops guys. We've done this for 30 years. We will now do this for AI. And 80 of them show up and they all raise money. And the question is like, what do you actually need as like sort of an AI native ops layer versus what is just plug into Datadog, right? I don't know if you have dealt with that because I'm not like a super ops person, but I appreciate the importance of this thing. I think there's 3 broad categories, which is frameworks, gateways, and monitoring or tracing. We've talked to I interviewed Human Loop in London, and after you've talked to a fair share of them, I've talked to a fair share of them.
Yep.
So the frameworks would be, honestly, I won't name the startup, but basically what this framework company was doing was charging me $49 a month to store my prompt template. And every time I make an inference, it would f-string call the prompt template on some variables that I supply. And it's charging $49 a month for unlimited storage of that. It's absurd, but like people want prompt management tools. They want to interoperate between PM and developer. There's some value there. I don't know what the right price is. There's some price.
I'm sure I can share this. I was at the Grab office, and they also treat prompts as code, but they build their own thing to then import the prompts.
I want to check prompts into my code base as a developer, right? But maybe, do you want it outside of the code base?
Like, how do you, you can have it in the code base, but like, what's like the prompt file? What's like, it's not just a string.
It's string and model and config.
Exactly. How do you pass these things? But I think like the problem with building frameworks is like, frameworks generalize things that we know work. And like right now, we don't really know what works.
Yeah, but some people have to try. And the whole point of early stages, you try it before you know it works.
Yeah, but I think like the past, if you see the most successful open source frameworks that became successful businesses, are frameworks that were built inside companies and then were kind of spun out as projects. So I think it's more
very
of
vertical pilled instead of horizontal pilled.
I mean, we try to be horizontal pill, right? And it's like, where are all the horizontal startups? So
there are a lot of them. They're just not that. They're not going to win by themselves. Yes. I think some of them will win by sheer excellent execution, and then but like the market won't pull them. They will have to pull the market.
But that's the thing. It's like, take like Julius, right? Yeah. It's like, hey, why are you guys doing Julius? It's like the same as Code Interpreter. And yet, they're pretty successful. A lot of people use it because they're like solving a problem. And then...
they're more dedicated to it than Code Interpreter.
Exactly. So it's like, I think...
it's taken more seriously than ChatGPT, you'll win.
I think people underestimate how important it is to be very good at doing something versus trying to serve everybody with some of these things. So... yeah, I think that's a learning that a lot of founders are having.
Yes. Okay, so to round out the ops worlds, so it's a 3-circle Venn diagram, right? It's frameworks, it's gateways. So the only job of a gateway is to be one endpoint that proxies all the other endpoints, right? And it normalizes the APIs mostly to OpenAI's API, just because most people started OpenAI. And then lastly, it's monitoring and tracing, right? So logging those things, understanding the latency, like P99 or whatever, and like the number of steps that you take. So Langsmith is obviously very, very early on to this stuff. But so is Langfuse. So is, my God, like there's so many. Like I'm sure like Datadog has some like weights and biases has some. It's very hard for me to choose between all those things. So I, as a small team developer, want one tool that does all these things. And my discovery has been that there's so much specialization here. There, like everyone is like, oh yeah, we do this, but we don't do that. For the other stuff, we recommend these two other friends of ours. And I'm like, why am I integrating 4 tools when I just need one? They're all the same thing. That is my current frustration. The obvious frustration solution is I build my own, right? Which is, we have 14 standards, now we have 15. So it's just a very messy place to be in. I wish there was a better solution to recommend to people, because right now I cannot clearly recommend things.
Yeah. I think the biggest change in this market is like latency is actually not that important anymore. Like we lived in the past 10 years in a world where like 10, 15, 20 milliseconds made a big difference. I think today people will be happy to trade 50 milliseconds to get higher quality output from a model. So, but still all the tracing is all like, how long did it take? Like, what's the thing? Instead of saying, is this quality good for this output? Like, should you use another model? Like, we're just kind of taking what we did with Claude and putting it in LLMs instead of saying what actually matters when it comes to LLMs, what you should actually monitor. Like, I don't really care what my P99 is if the model is crap, right? It's like, also like, I don't own most of the models. So it's like, this is the GPT-4 API performance. It's like, okay, am I calling some moment? It's like, I can't do anything about it, you know? So I think that's maybe why the value is not there. Like, you know, am I supposed to pay $100K a year? Like I pay to Datadog or whatever to tell me, for have you tell me that GPT-4 is slow? It's like, you know, it's just not, I don't know.
I agree, it's challenging there. Okay, so the last piece I'll mention is briefly, ML ops is still real. And I think LLM ops, or whatever we call this, AI engineer ops, the ops layer on top of the LLM layer might follow the same evolution path as the ML ops layer. And so the most impressive thing I've seen from the ML ops layer is from Apple. When they announced Apple Intelligence, they also announced Talaria, which is their internal ML ops tool, where you can profile the performance of each layer of a transformer. And you can A/B test like 100 different variations of different quantizations and stuff and pick the best performance. And I could see a straight line from there to like, okay, I want this, but for my AI engineering ops, like I want this level of clarity on like what I do. And there's a lot of internal engineering within these big companies who take their ML training very seriously. And I see that also happening for AI engineering as well. And let's briefly talk about RAG and context caching, maybe. Unless you have other like LLM OS stuff that you're excited about.
LLM OS stuff I'm excited about. No, I think that's really a lot of it is like move beyond being observability or like help for like making the prompt call and like actually being an LLM OS. You know, I think today it's mostly like LLM Rails, you know, like there's no OS, but I think like actually helping people build things. That's why, you know, if you look at XOI E2B, it's like that's the OS, you know, those are kind of like the OS primitives that you need around it.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll mention a couple things then. One layer I've been excited about publicly, but I haven't talked about it on this podcast, is memory databases, memory layers on top of vector databases. The vogue thing of last year was vector databases, right? Everybody had a vector database company. And I think the insight is that vector databases are too low level. Like they're not very useful out of the box. They do cosine similarity matching and retrieval, and that's about it. We'll briefly maybe mention here BM42, which was this whole debate between Vespa and who else? Quadrants, and I think a couple other companies also chipped in. But it was mainly a very, very public and ugly Twitter battle between benchmarking for databases. And the history of benchmarking for databases goes as far back as Larry Ellison and Oracle and all that. It's just very cute to see it happening in the vector database space. Some things don't change. But on top of that, like I think one of the reasons I put vector databases inside of these wars is in order to grow, the vector databases have to become more frameworks. In order to grow, the ops companies have to become more frameworks, right? And then the framework companies have to become ops companies, which is what LangChain is. So one element of the vector databases growing, I've been looking for what the next direction of vector databases growing is memory, long conversation memory. I have on me this B, which is one of the personal AI wearables. I'm also getting the limitless personal AI wearable, which is like I just wanted to record my whole conversation and just repeat back to me, or let me augment my memory. I'm sure Character.AI has some version of this. Like everyone has conversation memory that is different from factual memory. And right now, vector database is very oriented towards factual memory, document retrieval, knowledge-based retrieval. But it's not the same thing as conversation retrieval, where I need to know what I've said to you, what I said to you yesterday, what I said to you a year ago or 3 years ago. And there's a different nature of retrieval, right? So there's at the conference that we ran, GraphRAG was a lot of focus for people, the marriage of knowledge graphs and RAG. I think that this is commonly a trap in ML, that people are like, they discover that graphs are a thing for the first time. They're like, oh yeah, everything's a graph, like the future is graphs, and then nothing happens. Very, very common. This happened like 3-4 times in the industry's past as well. But maybe this time is different.
Maybe. unless.
So this is why I'm not an investor. Like, you have to get the time. This time is different because no ideas are really truly new. But sometimes this time is different.
Maybe.
And so memory databases are one form of that, where like they're focused on the problem of long form memory for agents, for assistants, for chatbots, and all that. I definitely see that coming. There were some funding rounds that I can't really talk about in this sector, and I've seen that happen a lot. I have one more category in LLM OS, but any comments on memory?
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense to me, that moving away from just semantic similarity, I think it's the most important, because people use the same word with very different meanings, especially when talking. When writing it's different, but yeah. So.
Yeah, the other direction that vector databases have gone into, which LanceDB presented at my conference, was multimodality. So Character.AI uses LanceDB for multimodal embeddings. That's just a minor difference. I don't think that's like a quantum leap in terms of what a vector database does for you. The other thing that I see in LLM OS world is mostly the evolution of like just the ecosystem of agents, right? The agents talking to other agents and coordinating with other agents. So I interviewed Graham Newbig at iClear, and he since announced that they are pivoting OpenDevin or broadening OpenDevin into all hands AI. I'm not sure about that name, but it is one of the 3 LLM OS startups that got funded in the past 2 months that I know about, and maybe you know more. They're all building like this ecosystem of agents working with other agents and all this tooling for agents. To me, it makes more sense. It is probably the biggest thing I missed in doing the 4 wars. The need for startups to build this ecosystem thing up, right? So the big categories have been taken. Search, done. Code interpreter, done. There's a long tail of others, right? So memory is emerging. Then there's like other stuff, and so they're focusing on that. Like to me, browser is slightly different from search, and Browser Base is another company I invested in that is focused on that. But they're not the only one in that category by any means. I used to tell people, go to the Devin demo and look at the 4 things that they offer, and they say each of those things is a startup. Devin, since then, they spoke at the conference as well. Scott was super nice to me and actually gave me some personal time as well. They have an updated chart of their plans. You look at their plans, they have like 16 things. Each of those things is a potential startup now. And that is the LLM OS. Everyone's building towards that direction because they need it to do what they need to do as an agent. If you believe in the agent's future, you need all these things. Yeah.
You think the agent OS is its own company? Do you think it's an open standard? Do you think...
I would love it to be open standard. The reality is that people want to own that standard. So we actually wound down the AI Engineer Foundation, where the first project was the Agent Protocol, which E2B actually donated to the foundation because no one's interested. Everyone wants to be VC backed when they want to own it, right? So it's too early to be open source. People will keep this proprietary, and more power to them. They need to make it work. They need to make revenue before all the other stuff can happen.
Yeah. I'm really curious. We're investors in a bunch of agent companies. None of them really care about how to communicate with other agents. They're so focused internally, But I think in the future, I talked about this.
You're talking about agent to other external agents.
Yeah. So I think...
I'm not talking about that.
Yeah. Yet. I wonder when, because that's where the future is going, right? So today it's like intra-agent connectivity, At some point it's like, well, it's not like I'm selling into a company and that company already uses agent X for that job. I need to talk to that agent, But I think nobody really cares about that today. So I think that's usually...
Yeah. So I think that layer right now is OpenAPI. Just give me a RESTful protocol. I can interoperate with that. RESTful protocol only does request response. So then the next layer is something I have worked on, which is long-running request response, which is workflows, which is what Temporal was supposed to do before, let's just say, management issues. Yeah, but RPC or some kind of, I think the dream is, and this is one of my problems with the LLM OS concept, is that do we really need to rewrite every single thing for AI native use cases? Shouldn't the AI just use these tools the same way as humans use them? The reality is, for now, yes, they need specialized APIs. In the distant future, when these things cost nothing, then they can use it the same way as humans does, but right now they need specialized interfaces. The layer between agents ideally should just be English, like the same way that we talk. But English is too underspecified, unstructured to make that happen. So
it's interesting because we talk to each other in English, but then we both use tools to do things to then get the response back.
For those people who want to dive in a little bit more, I think AutoGen, I would definitely recommend looking at that. Crew.ai. There are established frameworks now that are working on inter-agent communication layers to coordinate them, and not necessarily externally from company to company, just internally as well. Between if you have multiple agents farming out work to do different things, you're going to need this anyway. And I don't think it's that hard. It's they are using English. They're using some mix of English and structured output. And yeah, if you have a better idea than that, let us know.
Yeah, we're listening.
So that's the 4 wars discussion. I think I want to leave some discussion time open for miscellaneous trends that are happening in the industry that don't exactly fit in the 4 wars or are a layer above the 4 wars. So the first one to me is just this trend of open source. Obviously, this overlaps a lot with the GPU poor thing, but I want to really call out this depreciation thing that I've been working on. Like I do think it's probably one of the bigger theses that I've had in the past month, which is that we now have a rough idea of the deprecation schedule of this sort of model spend. And I basically drew a chart. I'll link it in the show notes, but I drew a chart of the price efficiency frontier as of March, April 2024. And then I had listed all the models that sit within that frontier. Haiku was the best cost per intelligence at that point in time. And then I did the same chart in July, 2 days ago, and the whole thing has moved. And Mistral is like deprecating their old models that used to be in the old frontier. It is so shocking how predictive and tight this band is. It's a very, very tight band, and the whole industry is moving the same way. And it's roughly 1 order of magnitude drop in cost for the same level of intelligence every 4 months. My previous number for this was 1 order of magnitude drop in cost every 12 months. But the timeline is accelerated because GPT-3 took about a year to drop order of magnitude. But now GPT-4, it's really crazy. I don't know what to say about that. But
do you think GPT Next and Claude 4 push it back down because they're coming out with higher intelligence, higher cost? Or is it maybe like the timeline is going down because new frontier models are not really coming out at the same rate?
Interesting. I don't know. That's a really good question. Wow. I'm stumped. I don't.
You're like, wow, you got a good question.
Yeah, I don't have an answer. No, I mean, you have a good question, but like, I thought I had solved this, and then now you came along with the first response is something I haven't thought about. So there's 2 directions here, right? When the cost of frontier of models are going up, potentially like SB 1047 is going to make it illegal to train even larger models. For its worth, I think the opposition has increased enough that it's not going to be a real concern for people. But I think every lab basically needs a small, medium, large play. And like we said in the sort of model deployment framework, first you pursue capability, then you pursue generalization, then you pursue efficiency. And what we're talking about here is efficiency. Like that now we care about efficiency. This definitely one of the emerging stories of the year that has happened is efficiency matters for 4.0, 4.0 mini, and 3.5 Sonnet in a way that in January nobody was talking about. And that's great.
Yeah.
Regardless of GPT Next and Claude 4 or whatever, or Gemini 2, we will still have efficiency frontiers to pursue. And it seems like doing the higher capable thing creates the synthetic data for us to do the efficient thing. And that means lifting up I had this difference chart between Llama 3.0 8B, Llama 3.0 7TB versus their 3.1 differences. And the 8B had the most uplift across all the benchmarks, right? It makes sense. You're training from the 4 or 5B, you're distilling from there, and it's going to have the biggest lift up. So the best way to train more efficient models is to train the large model.
Right, yeah.
And then you can distill down to the rest. So this is fascinating from an investor point of view. You're like, okay, you're worried about picks and shovels, you're worried about investing in foundation model labs. And that's a matter of opinion. I do think that some foundation model labs are worth investing in because they do pay back very quickly. I think for engineers, the question is, what do you do when you know that your base cost is going down an order of magnitude every 4 months? How do you make those assumptions? And I don't know the answer to that. I'm just posing the question. I'm calling attention to it. Because I think that cognition, burning like rumors is, I don't know nothing from Scott. I haven't talked to him at all about this, even though he's very friendly. But they did that. They got the media attention. And now the cost of intelligence is going down. And it will be economically viable tomorrow. In the meantime, they have a crap ton of value from user data, and a crap ton of value from some media exposure. And I think that the correct stunt to pull is to like make economically non-viable startups now and then wait.
Yeah.
But honestly, I'm basically advocating for people to burn VC money.
Yeah, no, they can burn my money all they want if they're building something useful. I think the big problem, not a problem, but the price of the model comes out and then people build on it. And then there's really no, the model providers don't really have a lot of leverage on like keeping the price high. You know, they just have to bring it down because the people downstream of them are not making that much money with them, you know? And I wonder what's going to be the model where it's like, this model is so good, I'm not putting the price down, you know? Like if GPT-4o was like amazing and was actually solving a lot of, like creating a lot of value downstream, people will be happy to pay. I think people today are not that happy with the models, you know? Like they're good, but like I'm not paying that much because I'm not really getting that much out of it. Like we have this AI Center of Excellence with a lot of the Fortune 500 groups, and there are people saving 10, 20 million a year, like with these models doing boring stuff, you know, like document translation, things like that. But nobody's making 100 million. Nobody's making 150 million. So like the prices just have to go down to match. But maybe that will change at some point.
Yeah,
you know?
I always mention temperature 2 use cases, right? Like those are temperature 0 use cases where you need precision, you need creativity. What are the cases where hallucination is a feature, not a bug, right? So we're the first podcast to interview WebSim, and I'm still pretty positive about the generative part of AI. Like we took generative AI and we used it to do RAG. You know, like we have an infinite creativity engine. Let's go do more of that. So we'll hopefully do more episodes there. You have some stuff on agents you want to?
Yeah, no, I think this is something that we talked a lot about, and we wrote this post months and months ago about shifting from software as a service to services as software, and that's only more true now. I think like most companies that are buying AI tooling, they want the AI to do some sort of labor for them, and that's why the picks and shovels kind of disinterest maybe comes from a little bit. Most companies do not want to buy tools to build AI. They want the AI, and they also do not want to pay a lot of money for something that makes employees more productive, because the productivity gains are not accruing to the companies. They're just accruing to the employees. You know, people work less, they have longer lunch breaks because they get things done faster. But most companies are not making a lot more money by making employees productive. That's not true for startups. So if you look at most startups today in AI, like they're much smaller teams compared to before. Versus agents, we have companies like, Brightwave, which we had on the podcast. You're selling labor, which is something that people are used to paying on a certain pay scale. So when you're doing that, if you ask Brightwave, they don't have it public, but like they charge a lot of money, more than you would expect, because hedge funds and like investment banking, investment advisors, they're used to paying a lot of money for research. It's like the labor. They don't even care that you use AI. They just want labor to be done.
I'll mention one pushback, but as a hedge fund, we used to pay for analyst research out of our brokerage cost and not read them. And that to me, that's my risk of Brightwave. But
I think
as a consumer of research,
if we want to go down the rabbit hole, there's a lot of pressure on funds for like a OpEx efficiency. So there's not really capture researchers anymore at most funds, and like even the sell side research is not that good.
Taking them from in-house to external things. Yeah, exactly. That makes sense. Yeah.
We have Dropzone that does security analysis. Same, people are used to paying for managed security or like outsource SOC analysts. They don't want to buy an AI tool to make the security team more productive. So
and what specifically does Dropzone do?
They do SOC analysis. So not SOC like the compliance, but it's like when you have security alerts, how do you investigate them? So large enterprises, they get like thousands of phishing email, and then they forward them to IT, and it's IT or security person, the tiered 0, has to go in and say, that's a phishing email, that isn't. So they have an agent that does that. So the cost to do, like for a human to do the analysis at the rate that they get paid, it's like $35 per alert. Dropzone is like $6 per alert. So it's a very basic economic analysis for the company, whether or not they want to buy it. It's not about, is my analyst going to have more free time? Like, is it more productive? So selling the labor is like the story of the market right now.
My version of this is I should start a consulting services today and then slowly automate my employees out of a job, right? Is that fundable?
Is that fundable? That's a good question. I think whether or not Depends how big you want it to make.
This is a services company, basically.
Yeah, that's what I know. Now it's maybe not as good of an example, but CrowdStrike started as a services company, security research.
Yeah, I mean, it's still one of the most successful companies of all
time.
Yeah, it's interesting model. I'm always checking my biases there. Anything else on the agents side of things?
No, that's really something that people should spend more time on. It's like, what's the end labor that I'm building? Because, sometimes when you're being too generic and you want to help people build things, like Adapt, David was on the podcast and he said they were sold out of things, but they're kind of like
and then he sold out himself.
Yeah, it's like they're working with each company, and the company has to invest the time to build with them.
You need more hands off.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's more verticalized.
Yeah.
That's
I'll shout out here Jason Liu. He was also on a podcast and spoke at the conference. He has this idea of like it's reports, not RAG. You want things to produce reports because reports can actually get consumed. RAG is still too much work, still too much chatbotting. I'll briefly mention that new benchmarks I'm thinking about. I think you need to have everyone in studying AI research, understanding the progress of AI and foundation models needs to have in mind what is next after MMLU. I have 10 proposals. Most of them, half of them come from the Hugging Face episode. So everyone's loving Clementine. I want her back on. She was amazing and very, very charismatic, even though she made us take down the YouTube. But MUSR for multi-step reasoning, math for math, IFEVL for instruction following, Big Bench hard, and it code. We're now getting to the area that the Hugging Face leaderboard does not have. And I'm considering making my own because I care about this so much. So MBPP is the current one that is post-human eval, because human eval is widely known to be saturated. And Scicode is like the newest one that I would point people to. Context utilization, we had Mark from Gradient on talk about ruler, but also zero scores and infinite bench were the two that Llama 3 used instead of ruler. But basically, something that's a little bit more rigorous than needle in a haystack. That is something that people need. Then you have function calling. Here, I think Gorilla, API Bank, Nexus, pretty consensus. I've got nothing there apart from, like all models need something like this. Vision now is like multimodality. The vision is the most important. I think like Vibe Eval is actually the state of the art here. Open to being corrected, and then multilinguality. So basically, like these are the 10 directions, right? Post MMLU, here are the frontier capabilities. If you're developing models, or if you're encountering a new model, evaluate them on all these elements, and then you have a good sense of how state of the art they are and what you need them for in terms of applying them to your use case. So I just want to get that out there.
Yeah, and we had the RKGI thing. How do you think about benchmarking for, everyday thing, or like benchmarking for something that is maybe like a hard to reach goal?
Yeah, this has been a debate for that's obviously very important and probably more important for product usage, right? Here I'm talking about benchmarking for general model evals. And then there's a schism in the AI engineering community, or criticism of the AI engineering community, that did not care enough about product evals. So Hamid Hussein led that, and I had a bit of disagreement with him, but I acknowledge that I think that is important. There was an oversight in my original AI engineer post. So the job of the AI engineer is to produce product-specific evals for your use case. And there's no way that these general academic benchmarks are going to do that because they don't know your use case. It's not important. They will correlate with your use case, and that is a good sign, right? These are very, very rigorous and thought through. So you want to look for correlates, then you want to look for specifics, and that's something that only you can do. So yeah, RKGI will correlate with IQ. It's an IQ test, right? How well does IQ test correlate to job performance? 5%, 10%, not nothing, but not everything. So it's important.
Anything else?
Super intelligence. we try not to talk about safety. My favorite safety joke from our dinner is that, if you're worried about agents taking over the world and you need a button to take them down, just install CrowdStrike on every agent, and you have a button that has just been proved at the largest scale in the world to disable all agents, right? So that safe super intelligence, you should just install CrowdStrike. That's what Elias Oskiver should do.
That's funny, except for the CrowdStrike people. Awesome, man. This was great. I'm glad we did it. I'm sure we'll do it more regularly.
We should do
now
more.
That you're out of visa jail.
Yeah. And I think, AI News is surprisingly helpful for doing this. Like, I had no idea when I started. I just thought I needed a thing to summarize Discords, but now it's becoming a proper media company. Like, 1,000 people sign up every month. It's growing.
Cool. Thank you all for listening.
Yeah.
See you next time.
Bye.